the oldest film we've done, Anton. And I did some math for you. So our list is now 925 films. We're averaging about 60 episodes per year. So we've got 15 years worth of content if we never add another film to the list. So we're good. We're good.
And you know what? That's more than a episode a week, more than a movie a week. So that's great content for listeners.
It is. We believe in doing that here at Why Wasn't It Better? This is Why Wasn't It Better? I am your host, Patrick Darms.
I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
Today on the podcast, a husband plots the perfect murder. What could go wrong? Dial M for Murder brings Alfred Hitchcock's signature suspense to a single claustrophobic setting, with Grace Kelly caught in the middle of a twisted game of manipulation and revenge. It's tightly constructed and critically respected, but why doesn't it get mentioned alongside Hitchcock's best? Anton, this is the oldest film that we've covered on the podcast so far, 1954.
We're in that fun classic Hollywood.
We are. Although at this point, you could almost say stuff from the 2000s is classic film, right?
Yeah, if we want to continue to question if we're the older generation talking about classic films from the 90s.
Right. But you are right. This is certainly still the golden age of Hollywood, 1954.
Yeah. Studio execs were just loving life. Movies were the big thing. Going to the movie houses were the big thing.
When Warner Brothers was actually run by a guy named Warner.
When the studio system was in place.
For good reasons and bad. I asked you this before we started recording. They were doing takes with real booze, right?
Oh, absolutely. If you think, if you think about Hitchcock, authenticity, right? Yeah.
He was a fan of the drink, right?
Yes. Hitchcock was one of the individuals where if he could have used practical effects, he'll always go for the practical effect, right?
I think that's all they had.
And
well, no, that's not true.
Yeah,
you're right. They had other stuff.
But then even if that included just having some real alcohol on set, because I think listeners may recall the story I told about Hitchcock actually wanting real cars during city scenes in Rear Window.
Which was filmed entirely on a soundstage, right?
Yes, and so people were falling ill because of the carbon monoxide.
Well, carbon monoxide was liberal propaganda in the 50s.
And Hitchcock was like, it's fine, they'll be fine.
They'll be fine. I find his voice particularly difficult to nail down because his accent it's a strange one. It is
strange. He has a bit of the something's in his mouth all the time kind of speaking.
A little bit of the marble mouth, and it's he kind of had a transatlantic accent, right? Because obviously he was born in Britain, but he lived in the States for so long, and he had a marble mouth.
Yeah, but
difficult to nail down.
Damn, did the man know movies?
He knew movies. You know, I didn't realize this until I was compiling the notes. This is the rare Hitchcock film that is actually filmed in the UK.
Yes. And it's really interesting when we go into that conversation around the transatlantic accent, because we do have actors here who are very famous for that. But at the same time, then we actually have British actors in the film. So,
and then we have British actors doing a transatlantic accent as well, which is a little confusing, but I don't mind it.
Yeah. And we have a princess in the film, Princess of Monaco and Grace Kelly.
Yeah. Before that, but yes, she wasn't a princess at the time.
No, but pretty interesting.
Well, we're going to talk about her later, but something else I found fascinating from the research, which I guess I realized this without actually knowing it. She only really worked 5 years. That's it. She retired when she was 26.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Oh my gosh. It is nuts, especially when you think about cultural impact of the movies she worked on. But hey, I mean, that's what happens when you partner with a genius like Hitchcock.
She was in a total of 12 films in 5 years. That's it.
But some of the best films of all time.
Yes.
Enough to associate Grace Kelly with Hollywood royalty.
Definitely Hollywood royalty. I didn't realize she won an Oscar for The Big Country, which I've never seen.
Yeah, it's I've seen it, and this is the era of Hollywood where it really did feel like the golden age. This is the time of of course famous films like Singin' in the Rain and
Country Girl. Sorry, not The Big Country. Yeah. Sorry, I misspoke there.
And it's just pushing the pushing the boundaries for what film is and what you can do with film. And that's a bit of the background of Dial M for Murder too. Because hey, like I would love to see this film in 3D.
You didn't know it was in 3D until we found it in the research, right?
Right. Yeah.
I had no idea. I was like, 3D? Because he's, not something you associate with Hitchcock. And from what I was reading, Hitchcock did not want to be associated with it either.
But what's funny is I read like it's very favorable watching it in 3D.
I'd love to see this in 3D.
Yeah. Like
apparently, you can see it if you have a 3D TV. They did issue it on the 3D Blu-ray probably 10 years ago or more. But like you could get your hands on it and watch it if you wanted to.
Just get a 3D PlayStation TV.
Yeah, I had one at one point.
Pretty sweet.
It was kind of a waste of money because I didn't really have anything to watch in 3D because nothing streamed in 3D, of course. So make of that what you will. It was a total gimmick.
But hey, do you think maybe we should go over the film now?
I think we can, yes.
Yeah.
Really quick bit of admin, though. I have to do the shameless plug. We have a Patreon if you are listening to the podcast and you like what you hear and you're thinking, maybe I want to throw some of my hard-earned money at these guys and their podcast. We have a Patreon. There's various levels of subscription. Links are in the description of the episode. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow and a 5-star review. Every little bit counts. But without further ado, Anton, please intro this for us.
Ex-tennis pro Tony Windus, Ray Milland, wants to have his healthy wife, Margot, Grace Kelly, murdered so he can get his hands on her inheritance. When he discovers her affair with Mark Halliday, Robert Cummings, he comes up with a perfect plan to kill her. He blackmails an old acquaintance into carrying out the murder, but the carefully orchestrated setup goes awry, and Margot stays alive. Now Wendis must frantically scheme to outwit the police and avoid having his plot detected. Released on May 29, 1954 by Warner Brothers, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, screenplay by Frederick Knott, based on his play, starring Ray Milland, Grace Kelly, Robert Cummings, John Williams, and Anthony Dawson. With a budget of $1.4 million, so $16.5 million adjusted for inflation, and a box office of $6 million, which was $70.8 million adjusted for inflation. Dun, 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 dun. Why was this movie chosen?
This has been a long time coming. We're very excited to do this. This is by popular demand, as well as our own popular demand, because you and I have talked about when are we actually going to get around to covering some Alfred Hitchcock. We got this question from listeners as well. We're like 150 plus episodes in now, and this is our first Hitchcock film, Anton.
Yeah, it's very exciting. A very exciting episode for listeners. Very exciting episode for us, because especially when the title of the podcast is "Why Wasn't It Better?" You wouldn't typically expect one of the greats to have a film on the list.
You wouldn't at face value, but of course, if you know anything about Hitchcock, he directed so many films that just by the bell curve of how it works, I think he's done over 50 films. They're not all great for various reasons, right? But I mean, when he is great, we're talking about some of the best stuff ever made. Some of my favorite films of all time are in there. I mean, Vertigo, Psycho, North by Northwest, Rear Window, Notorious, Rebecca, The Birds, To Catch a Thief, Strangers on a Train. I'm probably leaving some out, but you see where we're going with this.
And the man worked with some of the greats in Hollywood, Cary Grant, of course, Grace Kelly, our a good friend that worked on Rear Window,
James Stewart.
Did
you forget that he worked with Connery?
Which film?
Marnie.
Oh,
yeah. He worked with Connery one time. Young Connery. Same year as Goldfinger. Like young, up-and-coming Connery.
That's so cool. Yeah. No,
kind of a cool trivia bit for you about Connery. The Hitchcock film was really the first film that Connery did after he became Bond. Pretty cool tidbit about his career.
Very cool.
So why this movie was chosen, I kind of picked this one out of a hat for us, Anton, because I didn't really know where to begin with his filmography, right, with Hitchcock. It's so vast, and the quality really does vary, right? as much of a fan as I am of his, I've probably seen less of his films than I actually have seen when I was looking at the totality of his filmography. So I didn't really know where to begin. I didn't want to pick one of the super famous ones, right? Like, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense to pick Psycho or North by Northwest or something. I wanted to pick something that was from his, I guess you could call would it be fair to call the 1950s the peak of his career?
I think like his golden age, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like, he obviously worked until the 70s, but I don't know if the stuff that he did in the 70s is really loved.
No, and the man worked, and but you can really look at this point as that inflection point of working with the best in Hollywood and putting out his best work.
Right. So I wanted to pick a film that really, to the best of my knowledge, met the criteria for why wasn't it better. By this point, 1954, Hitchcock would have been a household name. There would have been a lot of anticipation for one of his films. Grace Kelly was one of the biggest movie stars in the world at this point in her, like we said, a very, very brief career. Dial M for Murder is a good choice for our first Hitchcock film, I feel, because it's well known. It's, I think, pretty well regarded, but I would not put it in that top tier of Hitchcock's films.
And I think like it's in the same conversation around, or similar to the conversation around like top 10 NBA players of all time. Like, who are you going to leave out if you try to list the top 10? You're going to leave out like a pretty amazing player. I think that's just
Malone.
Moses Malone,
Steph Curry, maybe.
Julius Erving.
Yes, right.
But I think if you think about Hitchcock, it's like the man had so many great films. It's interesting to think about Dial M for Murder being not one of his best films, or not being in the same conversation as his best films.
Right. And another reason why I chose it was, I'm sure I saw it at some point when I was much younger, but I didn't remember a whole lot about it. I was obviously aware of it. I had seen the remake, actually, more recently, A Perfect Murder, with Michael Douglas and Gwyneth Paltrow and Viggo Mortensen.
Right.
Because that was on TNT USA a lot in the 2000s. And I didn't realize this film has been remade a few times.
Yes, and referenced a lot in many points of media.
It's a very influential film, or at least some of the... I was familiar with what happens in the movie, is what I should say to you, rather than... I don't know that I had seen it before, actually, all the way through. This was like seeing it for the first time for me. So I didn't know that it was a play. This is what's known as a stage thriller, which is not really something it's not a term that's used anymore in film, but this would be Hitchcock's first of 3 collaborations that he did with Grace Kelly, and her association with this film alone, I think, is worth talking about.
Yes. I mean, talk about Hollywood royalty.
Literal royalty, eventually.
Yes.
A quick disclaimer, Anton. I have to say, this movie was more than likely brought to you by Johnny Walker Red, because Ray Milland's character drinks how many bottles of that throughout the course of this film?
Which do you like better, Red Label or Black Label?
I've probably had Black Label a lot more. I like Blue Label the best.
I actually prefer like Black Label overall. I think like
to Blue Label?
Yeah, like over like it's just I'm just so no, look, it's not, and even then, like it's, I think, just out of nostalgia and comfort.
Did you drink a lot of that in college?
If I had an extra buck or two.
What's the like cheapest one? Is that Black Label or is that Red Label?
I thought it was Red Label.
If there's any Johnny Walker enthusiasts listening, please write in and tell us. I think I've had Black more, but Green is the one I've had the least. Blue I've been lucky enough to have and never pay for it, which is a really lucky break because it's quite expensive. It's very, very good.
Yeah, and I think like a handful of times I've tried it, it's like, wow, like this is really good. But because I just know that very signature taste, like Johnny Walker's Black Label is consistently that same smooth finish every time.
They should sponsor the pod.
Yeah.
At this point.
The way we talk about it, yeah.
Yes, this movie was also brought to you by cigarettes.
Yeah, because it was the 50s and they smoke them on camera.
A lot. You know, someone's smoking in every scene, right? I think.
It feels like it.
Yeah.
It was also the heyday of like Lucille Ball.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think like who was the equivalent of Lucille Ball today?
I don't think there is one.
Because like she influenced TV and just film production.
I don't think there is one.
But I don't think people appreciate that as much.
Like, who's the modern day equivalent of Grace Kelly? There isn't one.
Meghan Markle?
Definitely not Meghan Markle.
Definitely not Meghan Markle.
Are you listening to her podcast?
No, I can't say that I'm a subscriber.
Is she in any movies we can cover? It doesn't. Probably not.
No, I really only know her on that one show, Suits.
Didn't she try to revive her career when she moved back to America with her husband?
Yeah, but that wasn't happening.
No, not happening. Anyway, let's get into the production history of Dial M for Murder. We've given a pretty run-on answer as to why I chose this film. I didn't have to twist your arm.
No.
Very rarely do I have to talk you into covering something.
Yeah, because I feel like we've also have a very shared appreciation for Hitchcock, and we've talked about it before. So when it got to the opportunity of like finally talking about a Hitchcock film, it's like, yeah, let's do it.
This is not going to be a long production history. Shortly after completing the film I Confess, that's another one I haven't seen. That was released in 1953. Alfred Hitchcock planned to make a film called The Bramble Bush. However, there were problems with the script and the budget, and Warner Brothers allowed him to scrap that and begin production on Dial M for Murder. The film was adapted by Frederick Knott based on his successful 1952 stage play. It is more or less a scene-by-scene adaptation. Pretty much the play as you would have seen it on stage, verbatim on film. Hitchcock originally wanted Cary Grant for the role of Tony Wendis, but the studio didn't think that he could convincingly play a villain, so that's how Ray Milland ended up being cast in the role. We mentioned this. This is Hitchcock's only 3D film. He is certainly not known for it. He didn't want to be known for it. This was, of course, due to the then recent and very temporary 3D craze. Studio head Jack Warner insisted that the film be made using the technology, which Hitchcock reluctantly did. He himself said, it's, quote, "It's a 9-day wonder, and I came in on the 9th day." Strangely, Hitchcock was unhappy making this. He admitted to phoning this in. And Grace Kelly said, quote, "The only reason he could remain calm was that he was already preparing his next picture, Rear Window," end quote. Anton, this is a hell of a year for Hitchcock and Grace Kelly. This film and Rear Window.
Okay, I mean,
pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. We might have to think about this a little bit. Is that the best year filmmakers had until Spielberg's 1993? Just in terms of the quality of the two films.
Oh, okay. So in terms of time spent and quality of film, it's like Spielberg is a really good example. I would have said Francis Ford Coppola for Godfather and Godfather 2.
Not the same year, though.
No, not the same year. But I'm just saying, like, short time period.
But I'm glad you mentioned Coppola because he did The Godfather 2 and The Conversation in the same year. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it is pretty good. But man,
I should probably stop asking a question that I don't have good enough answers to.
No, I think it's good conversation, especially for the listeners to ponder and think and comment in the video comments.
Pretty strong year.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, he made this and Rear Window in less than 12 months. The film's premiere was held in Philadelphia, and after one preview performance on May 18th and showings on May 19th, a Philadelphia theater owner contacted the studio and said that people were staying away, and he asked for permission to drop the 3D and show the film flat. I don't know anyone that's seen this in 3D. If my grandmother were still alive, I would have asked her because she went to the movies all the time, and of course she lived right outside Philadelphia. So she probably would have seen this. She was a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock. But yeah, this is like the strangest piece of research I've come across. I was like, this was a 3D film. Knowing that, watching the film is pretty interesting because you can tell there's a bunch of shots that were intended for it. And it completely changed how I would watch the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's it for the production history. Anton, let's talk why wasn't it better?
Let's do it.
Unique reason for the first reason. It's a question, is this thrilling? And what I want to ask you is, Hitchcock is the master of suspense. Is this film suspenseful to you?
This film is a really, really classic example of pacing feeling different in a different era. And like the build and suspense is not quite the same as it is now, but I do think very, very, very powerful. And I think what's interesting in that same regard is, and I mean, you definitely check me on this, I still found it very suspenseful, even if presented in a different way than like kind of what maybe people would expect of like a thriller nowadays.
Oh, I agree. I think there's a tremendous amount of suspense in here. And what I find most impressive about what Hitchcock has done here is he manages to generate all of the suspense where there really shouldn't be any, because you know what's going to happen. Tony lays out his plan to what's his Swan?
Right. Yep. Swan.
He in excruciating detail. They spend about 20 minutes going over what he wants Swan to do to murder his wife. So that's hard to do as a filmmaker. You're telling the audience exactly what's going to happen. And yet, first of all, there's a couple different ways I want to break this down. I want to come back a couple times to that 20-minute scene where he lets Swan in, and I didn't realize how long that scene was. It goes on for over 20 minutes, where he basically is tricking this guy and then blackmailing this guy, and then he has to convince him into murdering his wife, right?
Right.
Brilliant scene.
Yeah, and knowing that the way that everything is being built out, like you said, the suspense isn't with the crime itself.
Right. Although the actual murder scene, I think, is quite suspenseful, especially the lead up to it.
Yeah, with the building up she's on the phone.
Yes, and when they're in the restaurant, and then he realizes his watch has stopped, and he's like, "Oh no, I have to go call my boss." And you see him get up, and he can't get to the phone booth because there's somebody in it. Really well edited, really well scored, really well acted by all the players. Yeah. But I'm so fascinated by this because it's not some kind of a whodunit mystery. You know exactly who did it. You know who planned it. So the tension is basically coming from, first of all, if you've never seen the film and you're not familiar with it, you're not sure if the murder is actually going to happen. And then when it doesn't, and there's a twist on it, then it becomes, is Tony going to get away with this or not? That's where all the tension comes from. So I think you're right to call it out. It's paced completely differently from a modern film, but I actually think it's very well paced.
Yeah. And it's because of that, again, we have to go within this mindset for Hitchcock. And this feels like how to direct and tell a story unconventionally, or like at least like from how typically like a thriller would be presented. And it's just so amazing to see like that as a bit of a directing exercise or like film exercise when we know that there was man was phoning it in.
Well, that's the craziest part, right? He admitted to phoning. Yeah, he's like, yeah, I didn't really take that one too seriously. It's like, well, could have fooled us. Because another thing too, and this is something very few filmmakers could accomplish, this amount of tension, with a handful of exceptions, the whole film takes place in this flat, in basically one room.
A great looking room, right?
Great looking room. If I didn't know that it was adapted from a play, it's absolutely filmed like a play. I mean, for sure.
Yes, especially set piece wise, you could totally see how it would fit on stage.
And then the whole thing hinges on a key.
Yes.
The whole plot revolved the right key. I just want to say, apparently everyone in London uses the same latch key, which I thought was funny.
That was pretty hilarious.
No one uses a keychain. You know, when he's like, "Oh, when Ray Milland's like, darling, have you seen my key? I've seemed to misplace mine." I was like, "Well, put it on a keychain, man."
It's like,
oh, here it is. Here it is in my glove.
Is it because it was a time before keychains and also a time before like forensics?
Well, there was some forensics.
Some.
They mentioned fibers and fingerprints.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's the same level of forensics that we have now.
Oh, no, not even close.
Like, this is not CSI.
It's not. Well,
people are just messing with a crime scene.
Well,
because like, what was it? It was. I want to say it was J. Edgar Hoover that really founded modern day forensics, right?
Yes, I think he really pushed the widespread use of fingerprints and stuff like that. Yes.
Yeah. And that was around the same time period. So maybe we get some of that, but
did seeing the stockings make you think of J. Edgar Hoover?
Yeah. Made me think of that, or also made me think of that film, J. Edgar.
It's on our list. It's not great.
No, you're fine. It's just solid weight.
That'll be an interesting film to cover.
Yeah.
The rare DiCaprio misfire.
That was a weird one.
Weird movie. Yeah. Well, here's my question for you based on everything we were just talking about. What did you actually think of Tony's plan?
I think that very, very well thought out, but I don't know if it was the best plan.
No, I think resorting to murder is never the logical choice.
Right, like, he thought of every single little thing.
Because he
And
said
like
he'd been planning it for what,
yeah.
like a year?
Yeah, and like, give him that, but like at the same time I'm like, you're gonna get caught.
How long was he watching Swan? Was it like, it was months, right?
Yeah, and you can tell he's very meticulous, thinking of every single little thing.
He did think of everything pretty much. His whole plan gets messed up because Swan puts the key back under the stair carpet after he unlocks the door, right? And he mistakenly assumes that Swan was going to do exactly what he told him to do, which is replace the key after you leave. But then he accidentally, no, when he takes the key out of Swan's coat, it's Swan's latchkey, right? That's where the whole thing goes wrong for him. That's what tips off Inspector Hubbard.
Oh my gosh.
I think, right? Yes.
Yes, that sounds right.
Yeah, Swan is supposed to put the key back under the stair carpet when he's leaving, but instead Swan unlocks the door and then immediately puts the key back.
Right.
And then he has his own key in his pocket, and that's where, yes, okay. It's good of us to work this out during the recording. I was trying to think, like, would his plan work today?
No.
Probably not, but
well,
that's why I want to revisit that remake, with Michael Douglas. I haven't seen that in a while, and I'm kind of curious how different it is from this.
Well, I think what elements of it, right, wouldn't really translate well. There's a lot of reliance on things like even the telephone, or like lack of forensics,
right,
or the use of like the key. Like the whole key problem seems like it would be pretty solvable in modern day.
Like why didn't they just copy the key?
Right. Other Hitchcock films that have had modern adaptations, there's like Disturbia is a really famous one with Shia LaBeouf. And like instead of him breaking his leg and being stuck inside, it's like he's under house arrest. And I think like that's even a much more, like, that actually is really compelling as like a story element of like he literally can't leave the premises of his house. So I think like stories have been adapted for the modern day pretty effectively.
Yeah, I really want to see that Perfect Murder now again, because I don't remember too much about it.
Yeah, the only one that I don't know could be adapted for the modern day is The Birds.
That'd be tough.
It'd be tough, right? Because it's like, I think the classic aesthetic makes it a bit more palatable to be freaked out by all the birds.
Yeah.
But like nowadays, it's just almost like,
I hope they never remake that. It doesn't need to be remade.
Well, they kind of did, right? Birdemic.
I didn't see that. Was that a real attempt to remake it, or was that like a joke?
It was a real attempt to make a real film that ended up as a joke.
Fair enough. Yeah, Tony's plan here, what I like about his plan is not so much the plan itself, but one of the reasons why I think the film still works is he's a great improviser. When he's faced with issues, like when Margot tells him, oh, well, I don't really want to give you my key because I might go out. And he's like, what, you're going out tonight? And he really quickly pivots and like manipulates her into staying at home. Good acting from everyone involved, but I think that's what kind of sold it for me, is like, oh, wow. Like, he not only did he plan out every detail, he's able to make adjustments to this on the fly. He's so determined to have this woman murdered.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about his Ray Milland's acting a little bit later. We mentioned the 3D of it all, right?
Yeah, and there are definitely scenes where you could see how either looking around corners or even like the perspective of different actors and scenes could be feeling more imposing with 3D.
Yeah, I'm sure you noticed this, like I did. The position of the lamps in the house, it's a lot of the lamps are in the foreground, and the camera is like moving around objects. Usually it seems to be lamps.
Yeah, and it's creating depth, right?
Yeah. It's so fascinating to just know that it was filmed for 3D. I probably wouldn't have noticed it, to be honest. It's probably not something I would have picked up on, but it's really interesting. It's certainly unique, even for a Hitchcock film.
Yeah, and again, what I've read, it's very favorable on the 3D version. I don't know what you're like. Let me know your take, but I think 3D in general is just very distracting, just as a process to watch, because you have to put on like 3D glasses, which already like that can take away from the watch experience. So if the film isn't 100% capturing my attention, if I have to put on 3D glasses too, like, okay, I'm not 100% sold and like losing myself in this film.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you on that. I mean, I've been to movie experiences wearing 3D where I really enjoyed it, like Avatar.
Avatar is a pretty famous one where people say you need to see it in 3D.
Yeah, I mean that was cool. Were any of the Pixar movies in 3D?
I don't remember seeing them specifically filmed for 3D and like if there were 3D versions.
I think the fact that I can't even remember what I've really seen in 3D other than Avatar probably says a lot about it.
Yeah, and like there was this short resurgence of 3D in the 2010s.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, actually, I should say I remember seeing Clash of the Titans, which looked like crap in 3D because they converted it to 3D in post.
Yeah, I think that's to my point. Like it can be very gimmicky if not used in a very thoughtful way. And I feel like if you have something like Avatar and the mind like James Cameron, it's like let's use this to create depth. Let's use it to create immersive experience. And I feel like that's what Hitchcock used 3D for in this film. It's like, well, I gotta use it. Okay, like let's try it like this.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly tell there's stuff that he would have normally not done. There's a lot of like really low angles. There's high angles. There's also, I mean, this is throwing darts a little bit. There are a few like really weird, wonky looking shots that I think just don't work. And I don't know if it was specifically for the 3D format, but there's a couple shots during the 20-minute scene between Ray Milland and Anthony Dawson where the camera is like tilting up on Anthony Dawson's character Swan. It's I don't really know why it's in the film.
Yeah,
Stuff like that.
It's a weird tracking shot.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of it.
Yeah, but not like maybe again with the context of watching it in 3D. Like again, is it like a more sweeping perspective?
I don't know, but during that scene when the camera switches, it lasts for a couple minutes. It's when Tony is explaining to Swan in precise detail how he's going to murder his wife. The camera is entirely from like this overhead shot, and it's like tracking back and forth as they walk from like left to right in that what would you call it, like a giant living room, parlor, whatever, the main room of the flat.
Right.
And that shot lasts for a couple of minutes. I thought that was really effective. And I don't know how 3D would have enhanced that, but I enjoyed it as the viewer. But that might not have been related to the 3D at all. Like that's just the kind of stuff you would get with a Hitchcock film.
I think you're totally right. It's really interesting where I think the technical expertise on Hitchcock's part is being able to film a lot of these scenes, but it never feels like there's too much editing or too much movement. He does allow like scenes to flourish and develop with a single camera angle.
You see both sides of it in this film. Like I can't mention it enough. That 20-minute scene between those two actors.
Oh, it's just
it's incredible.
Yeah, it's great. It's if anyone's ever watched like classic Akira Kurosawa, like I wouldn't be shocked if they both watched each other's films. Because it's very similarly being able to capture like actors either monologuing or having a dialogue, but again, just very simple shot.
And a 20-minute scene is hard to do in any movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, it starts off, he calls this, I'm talking about Tony, Ray Milland's character. He calls this guy about a car. He invites him over. You don't, if you have no knowledge of the film, you're like, what is this guy's deal? Like, what is he doing? This is kind of boring. He invites this guy in. He serves him brandy. After a couple minutes, he's like, wait a minute, what's your real name? I recognize you from somewhere. And then you get the Hitchcock cameo in the picture where one of them realizes that they went to Cambridge together. And then the whole thing flips on this one camera shot when he talks about his wife's infidelity. And he's like, and then everything changed. I saw you. And then Anthony Dawson turns and looks directly into the camera. And it's a really effective shot. And the entire tone of the scene flips. And then it becomes this murder plot, right?
Yeah.
And that's really good tension. And the actual murder scene itself, you get the classic Hitchcock editing. It's pretty rapid.
Yeah. And I think like that, it's a really fun example of like pace is unconventional, but at the right time, Hitchcock knows when to turn it up.
Definitely. Definitely. The actual murder scene, it's the murder scene itself. I think it's fantastic. There's all these. The music's great. The editing's great. There's like Dutch angles. There's like real weird stuff. Again, he really did stand apart from a lot of his contemporaries. There were not a lot of films that were shot and blocked like that in the 50s.
No, also the subject matter, not the same. This was an era where a lot of what was popular, of course, was more extravagant locales. People were shooting films about either westerns, or people were shooting films about being in Egypt or more exotic locations. There were a lot of musicals back then. So for the subject matter to be about human relationships and trying to capture
And
it.
of course, those films have their merits. And
Right.
I think we're maybe discounting some of the film noir stuff that was going on at that time too.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
They were doing some of this too. I wouldn't call this noir. I don't think it is.
I don't think so. I don't
No.
think it's the same category.
In terms of the pacing as well, and this deals with the suspense of the film. This was a deliberate choice on Hitchcock's part. He doesn't waste time with the courtroom scene. When Grace Kelly gets arrested and gets sentenced, it's really interesting how it's filmed. It's just a close up of her face, and you hear the voices of the judge, or I should say the judges, and it slowly turns red. You actually see the judge getting a wig placed on his head, which is just bizarre. And then I had to think about that. I'm like, yeah, England judges in the courtroom still wear wigs like that, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, I don't even know what they're called, but the
Not
curls.
barristers, because that's a lawyer. Oh, you mean the wigs have a name too?
No, I thought they do.
Oh, you might be right. I'm not sure. They still use them though, which is just it's not.
Well, it's a thing, right? Even in Australian Parliament.
They use it there too.
Yeah.
Commonwealth.
U.S. colony.
Former.
Yeah.
Queen's not on our money. One detail I wanted to note. This has nothing to do with the tension, but it does have to do with the plot. If she killed this guy who was trying to blackmail her, right? That's ostensibly what she's being charged with, right? This guy was trying to blackmail you and you killed him.
And then immediately being sentenced to death.
Right.
It's intense.
Wouldn't she have taken the letter out of his pocket? You know how they find the letter in there with his fingerprints on it?
Seems like the most logical thing.
Although, as we see, her character's not too smart, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
No, she was...
Oh, Tony.
Very clearly interesting, right? Because she does get posed to be a bit more sympathetic despite the infidelity.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that. I have some questions about that, though.
Versus other Hitchcock films where it's... If characters are... Specifically even like Psycho, characters that are in relationships that are, they're cheating on their significant other, like, oh, something bad's gonna happen.
They're stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Well, I want to see this in 4K because the version that I found on streaming, it wasn't the greatest. And 4K, this was shot on old fashioned 35 millimeter film, which is basically what 4K is today.
Yeah, it's gonna look great.
That's another thing. I mean, a lot of films from this era, it's like rediscovering them because I'm trying to think. A lot of times when I saw Hitchcock films originally, it was on a square TV in the 90s and early 2000s with my dad.
I saw it on VHS, man.
Yeah, so it's like you're just seeing it. It was probably it was cropped, right? Pan and scan or something.
And you think to yourself, this is an old film. It looks old.
But you see it now in high def. These old films, a lot of them just pop.
Yeah, and we've experienced that with classic Bond, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like this also gets that same treatment. Put this under 4K resolution, it's like seeing it for the first time. I want to see it 4K.
I think I told you this. Oh, for the anniversary, this would have been 2018 of Vertigo. I saw it in the theater.
Oh, and I'm sure it looked amazing.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
That is, I think, probably Hitchcock's best looking film. Would you agree?
I do love Vertigo. Best looking, I still really love Rear Window. And I think I just biased because that's one of my favorite films.
I mean, Rear Window is probably my favorite Hitchcock film, but the only reason I'm saying Vertigo is Rear Window is basically in the same room the whole time, but Vertigo, it's San Francisco never looked better in a film.
That's true.
Holy crap.
Well, you get a bit of you get a bit of depth in the birds. The birds is just a bit more chaotic.
It's good looking. I mean, North by Northwest, you could put that on the list.
Yeah, but like, no, that's fair.
It's just such a beautiful film.
Yeah,
He was probably number one on the list of like filmmakers who were ahead of their time, wouldn't you say?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Held back by the Hays Code.
True.
He was.
True.
I mean, it's
yeah.
He was clearly trying to work around it. Quentin Tarantino gives a really good interview about Hitchcock and how he was held back by the Hays Code. Just imagine if Hitchcock were like 30 years younger and he was able to make movies in like the 80s and 90s.
And
man,
I think it'd be very interesting subject matter, because especially when you think about what he decided to direct and what films he wrote and chose. Again, not the same as contemporaries, right? A lot of metaphor, a lot of commentary on like modern relationships at the time. What do you think he's writing about in the 80s and the 90s, you know?
Good question.
Like it probably would feel, is it a dissection of like yuppie culture? Is it a dissection of like, that'd be really interesting.
Like, imagine Alfred Hitchcock adapting a Stephen King book.
That'd be fun. That'd be really fun.
Counterpoint to my own statement. Or was Hitchcock the right man for the right era because of the trailblazing that he did set the framework for future filmmakers? Like with something like Psycho, he basically creates the template for what would become
the slasher
modern horror film in the 70s and 80s. Like, was he right where he belonged? I don't know.
Look, all I can say is that every era needs its every era needs its trailblazer, someone that's leading the way, someone that's innovating, and Hitchcock was innovating.
Would he have just been Brian De Palma if he came later? Because that's what Brian De Palma was.
I think that Jordan Peele gets compared to Hitchcock a lot these days. I think that he needs a bit more. He needs more films to be made.
I need more.
I need more films, but I can see why they would say that, because it is, even if not all of his films are as big hits as like his first film, like I am really impressed with his work, and I do see a lot of parallels.
Get Out, it was an instant classic.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite movies from the 2010s. I didn't really like Us.
I didn't either, but at the same time, I look at the aesthetic and it is very innovative.
It's unique.
It's very unique.
I'll give it that. I really liked Nope. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
So I'm curious, like he has another one coming out. I forget exactly what the title is, or what the subject matter is, but
I'll see it.
Yeah, and
anything he does, I'm interested in.
And I think like that's the same thing with like Hitchcock is, or even just thinking about like modern day directors in comparison to like who's being Hitchcock, or who's, not to clown on him, but like who's being Mangold. We
don't have to clown on Mangold. We're Mangold fans on this podcast.
Yeah, like I'm not, but it's very different, right?
Yeah. Well, we talked about this with Garrett. Like James Mangold, great director.
He's a great director, and Hollywood could go to him for, you want a particular kind of film, you go to Mangold, right? But Hitchcock will push the limits.
Yes. Let's talk about the acting.
Mm-hmm.
So my memory of this film was completely wrong. If you see this movie, like if you watch the trailer or like a modern trailer for this, and based on who's in it, I thought of this as a Grace Kelly movie. It's not. This is the Ray Milland show all the way. I was not expecting that. I had never seen Ray Milland in anything else. And I have to say this, Anton, and this is someone who considers Cary Grant to be one of their favorite actors. Like Cary Grant's he's one of my 3 to 5 favorite actors ever. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, again, take your pick of which one of the greatest of all time films of his, right?
That's a tough choice. It's probably a Hitchcock film, but I won't tell you which one. It's not the one you think it is. So we can get to Cary Grant in a minute, because he's the one who Hitchcock wanted for the role of Tony. I am so glad we got Ray Milland. I was so impressed with what I saw from him. He's fantastic in this.
Yeah, and just devious, right? Obsessive.
I wrote down he's got shark teeth.
That's true.
Because he starts off the movie, he's witty, he's charming, he's pretty suave, but everything flips.
Yep.
In that scene with Anthony Dawson's character Swan. And then once you see who he really is and what he's capable of and what he's planning, The menace is there the whole time.
And that is so well done in that the way that Hitchcock shows you his character, right?
You know he's up to something when you see him faking that limp with the cane right before Swan arrives. You're like, what? You're like, what's he up to? Like, what's the point of doing this?
Like, there's something off about him.
Yeah. Now I have to say this. Have you ever seen Suspicion?
Yes.
Okay, so Cary Grant, that's probably the most villainous role he's ever played. So I think he could have done a great job with this. But this is an example of where I think the studio was right to not cast Grant in this role. I mean, I was just so impressed with what Ray Milland did here.
Yeah, and I also not as familiar with Ray Milland and his work before this film or even during the time, but probably audience expectations would have been very different had Cary Grant been the lead.
Yeah, and I mean that's why they didn't want him in this. I mean, Ray Milland is certainly not a household name today. You know, I doubt anyone who's not into films from that era recognizes the name. He certainly was a big name though in his era. I mean, Academy Award winner. I've never seen the film that he won for. It's called The Lost Weekend. I understand he's very good in it. He wasn't nominated for an Academy Award for this. I'm not terribly familiar with who was nominated in 1954, but this is certainly an Academy Award worthy performance from him.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes. If you have no knowledge of this film and you're seeing it for the first time, you and I had some knowledge of what happens, right? But if you didn't, you're pretty sympathetic to his character in the beginning, right? You're like, wow, his wife's having this very brazen affair behind his back with this guy, and she invites him into their home, which is pretty scummy on her part. We'll talk about that in a minute. Right. You really do kind of feel for him in the first 20, 30 minutes. And then the film, which I think is very difficult to do, and give Ray Milland and Hitchcock credit, and the writer who wrote the play, obviously, you're then asked to root against him for the rest of the film, and they pull it off.
Which I think this is excellent writing, excellent, like you said, all around this is great because it touches on these very like real feelings. Like people know what it's like to either like be betrayed or understand, like feel sympathetic for a character that feels wronged. But then, like, can you feel so sympathetic for someone that takes it to such an extreme on how they want their perverted idea of justice?
Probably should have just asked her for a divorce and some money.
He thought he wasn't going to get anything.
Well, that's one of the questions I was going to ask you. Was he doing this for money?
No, it's not just the money.
No.
It can't be.
No, it's his ego.
Yeah.
What he reveals in one of his monologues to Swan is his pride has been greatly wounded, and the only way that he can deal with it is like, well, I've just got to have my wife killed. I can't do it myself, so I have to have someone else do it.
Yeah, it's what is it? He's an embodiment of one of the 7 deadly sins.
Pride.
Yeah.
Right? Not greed, because he's not.
No.
I don't think he's doing it for money. I mean, she is described as quite wealthy.
Yes.
And if
the inheritance.
Tony, the inheritance. I mean, if you caught a glimpse of that street they live on in London, that is not a bad neighborhood. I don't know what street it is, but
yeah, it's a good street. Bosh.
If you know, you know. He's so brilliant in this role, Ray Milland.
Yeah,
I really like Did you watch it twice?
I did. Yeah, well, I watched it once, and then I watched it a second time, but sped through certain parts to get to different scenes.
Okay. You didn't fast forward through the scene with Swan, right?
No.
Okay. Did you notice when he shows Swan the reunion photograph? This is, I think, possibly the best part of the film for me, or at least my favorite part, I should say. And Swan remarks, "What a murderous thug I looked like." And Tony just smirks and he goes, "Yes, you rather do."
Such a small little detail.
It's so you can tell he's just cracking up inside.
Yeah, I find that it almost feels like the conversation is so heavy, but at the same time, do you feel like the dialogue's realistic?
No, because people don't talk like that anymore. But at the same time, yes, because it feels naturalistic. It feels like a real conversation. Mm-hmm. It has a really nice flow to it. So I think, it feels realistic to me in the sense that what I really like about both the performances of the actors in that scene is, especially Milland, you can tell he's having a lot of fun with the role, but I don't feel like he's overacting. He's not hamming it up.
Right. No, not at all. There's enough subtlety, but at the same time, is it one of those things where like a great actor can like really even act with their eyes? And I feel like that was Milan to a T. Was like,
Shark eyes.
yeah, it's just losing myself with either a slight glare told 1,000 words, right?
Yeah, he even manages to do acting like so the scene right before him and Mark, which is Margot's lover, right? When they're
Mm-hmm.
having martinis and they're about to go out to the dinner party, the stag party is what he calls it. You know, Mark is of course a murder mystery writer, which they have fun with, and she asks him, "Is there such a thing as a perfect murder?" And Tony's facing away from them, and he starts to talk about what he thinks is the perfect murder, and Tony like stops, and you can see him like listening. It's he's not even looking at the camera, and you can great acting.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, he's very much the star of the show here, and like I said, I remembered it as. It's not that Grace Kelly's not in this a lot, but she's in far less of it than I thought she would be. She's
Yeah.
not the star of this film, although she was certainly the biggest name in it.
Yeah, and for me, it's I really enjoy this film, but I think like her character written sympathetically despite her actions, I don't think that she was an innocent in all of this.
I agree with you. I mean, certainly innocent, and like you feel bad for her because her husband's trying to have her killed. But
Right.
I know what you mean, and I don't want to. How do I say this? I think I agree with what you're saying because like it's not a fault of Grace Kelly's. It's the writing. At no point does she express any remorse for her actions. And obviously, did she deserve what happened to her? Absolutely not.
No, we're not. I'm not. No one's trying to condone like
No.
anything, any harm coming her way.
Let's just get that out of the way.
It's just that I feel like in a more complete story, there is also a lesson to be learned of like, hey, like people shouldn't practice infidelity, right?
It's not even just the infidelity. I used the word brazen earlier to describe her affair. So she's having an affair with this guy who lives in America. She invites this guy into her home before her husband gets home. And then when her husband gets home, she tries to pass this guy off as like a friend and like, oh, Tony, like you can hang out with him. That is insane.
And I think I do think that that's great writing. I think that's great writing because then you start to push. It starts to push more of the morality meter for the viewer.
Yeah,
it's like, who are you going to root for now?
Because this is all before the murder plot is hatched, so you really do feel bad for Tony. You're like, wow, he doesn't have any he has his wife is doing this in front of him, flaunting it. That's insane. And then it flips.
But at the same time, I do think for a lot of the film, her character is
stupid, kind of stupid.
for. I was gonna say along for the ride.
She's not. Let's say she's naive.
And Hitchcock doesn't always write. Hitchcock's known for writing great roles for
Hitchcock.
Hitchcock can write great roles for any gender. So I feel like maybe it was just this film. He didn't write the film right.
No. This is straight from the play. They didn't change any of this.
Yeah,
from the play.
This is straight from the play. And I feel like maybe stylistically it was okay. This is maybe the best way to write or to depict the character, but as more of a building as more and more sympathetic. I don't know.
She's very passive. Where I think they would have changed things if they do another, let's say they did a more modern remake of this. And again, I want to see A Perfect Murder because I want to see how that's handled differently in the 1990s. She really in this film plays no active role in her own defense. She's entirely saved by Inspector Hubbard and her lover Mark. I mean, I used the word stupid. I take that back a little bit. She's pretty careless and helpless in this film.
Yeah, there's no way she would have gotten out of the situation if not for the people around her.
Yeah, I wish we saw a little bit more of an active role from her. Like, she never suspects her husband, even until the end. She's like, they hint at it, and she's like, I don't really feel anything. I'm supposed to feel something. Shouldn't I be having a breakdown? Nothing.
And that for me, if I'm gonna nitpick, that sends the film a few scores down,
Yeah, it bugged me too.
Yeah.
It did. And again, it's not a fault of Grace Kelly's. I think her acting is fine. I don't think it's by any means an amazing performance. She's fine.
It's just how it was written,
Right.
right? And I'm trying to think, like, how could have there been more, quote unquote, like, what's a better lesson to be learned, or like, how can we know a lesson's been learned? Because I don't think she did learn a good one at the end.
Doesn't really express any remorse for what she did.
No remorse. Just sweet. Like, I get what I want, basically.
It doesn't really explain why she ever cheated on Tony in the first place. I mean, obviously she seems to love this guy, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, fine. She loves this guy, but the film doesn't make it clear. Does she love Tony? It's not really clear. It's dated. I just thought that's the most dated part of the film to me.
Yeah.
I think that Hitchcock was just banking on the fact that Grace Kelly is so unbelievably good looking, no one will care.
Yeah, and I think maybe this was a good sign of Hitchcock didn't care to provide a better resolution for the character.
Very possible.
It's like, you know what? Not every character is going to get their good lesson or comeuppance in the end.
Listen, I'm about to make this movie Rear Window with her later in the year. I don't care. That's a terrible Hitchcock. I'm sorry.
But like, you would agree, like, for the most part in his films, it's a very, like, there's a really nice bow at the end for like what each character has learned, or like what the lesson is learned.
What did she learn?
Not much.
Moving through the rest of the cast, Robert Cummings as her lover, Mark, fine. His character's fine. His acting's fine.
Classically handsome.
Yeah, handsome guy. I mean, if I were him, I'd be a little apprehensive about if I fly over to London to see my lover and she's like, "Oh, do you want to meet my husband?" I'd probably say no, but that's me.
I'd be like, no. It's like, no, I'm not Adam Sandler.
And funny people.
Yeah.
Let's hang out. Yeah. The MVP of the film, besides Ray Milland for me, is John Williams as Inspector Hubbard.
Inspector Hubbard, the man.
Steals every scene he's in.
Yeah. Great actor. Like, just great actor.
I was trying to think, where have I seen him in elsewhere? He's in a couple other Hitchcock films. You probably recognize him. He plays the insurance agent in To Catch a Thief.
Oh, Cary Grant classic.
Yes, also Grace Kelly. That is on our list to cover as well, Anton. That's a great looking European setting movie. Man, what a visual treat that is.
I always thought Richard Gere would do well in like a Hitchcock film.
I could see that.
Like, he just has that like look. And then like the one film that he was in that kind of reminded me of like a Hitchcock film, but was also like weirdly erotic, was Unfaithful.
Yeah. Yeah. You know who directed that, right?
Yes, it was tip of my tongue. Reveal now.
Adrian Lyne, who did Fatal Attraction.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Makes sense.
I thought you were going to say American Gigolo, which also I could have seen Hitchcock doing something like that.
Yeah. But I don't know, if especially with the end of Unfaithful, it felt like a Hitchcock ending.
Would you say a morally ambiguous ending?
Morally ambiguous, but then it draws the what the right thing to do is at that point.
Bury it.
Or no, actually, not even at that point. You know what the right thing to do is that whole film, which is nothing that any of the main characters are doing.
No, you're just like, they did that. Yeah, but this one, John Williams, man.
Yeah,
he's great. Hubbard, he's pretty funny. They kind of use him as comedic relief. You think he's kind of clueless at first, and then you realize when do you realize he's on to Tony when he does the thing with the key?
He's much more capable than he's let on.
Yeah. I'm trying to jog my memory here. What makes him start suspecting Tony? Is it the money?
It was the money.
Yeah, he just thinks like this doesn't add up. Yeah,
it was the notes.
He's like, there's something weird about this. Yeah. The briefcase full of money. That wasn't.
It's like, why do you have like an attaché?
There's no legitimate reason for that. Speaking of dated, nobody would have an attaché. I like when Swan asked him, like, let me see your banknotes. He like flips through the pages. So great.
Has that.
Speaking of Anthony Dawson, familiar face. I knew him as Professor Dent in the first James Bond film, Dr. No.
But we've already talked about Dawson, other Bond films, right?
Yes, because here's the cool thing about him. He played the faceless version of Blofeld in From Russia with Love and Thunderball. Not the voice, but he was the physical presence of Blofeld. When you see his hands and stuff, that's Anthony Dawson.
Yeah,
it's really just random bit of
Fun
trivia.
fact.
Yeah, and here's the other
Yeah.
cool thing. This is a good decision on Hitchcock's part. John Williams and Anthony Dawson, they were in the original Broadway production of this play.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so he
Yeah.
kept both of them for the film.
It was never the best Blofeld of all time, Telly Savalas.
He's my favorite Blofeld. No, I'm not kidding. He really
Oh,
is.
he's so cool.
Yeah. To be fair, we don't have the highest bar. We have Donald Pleasance, who's iconic but a little goofy.
A little different.
And then we have very goofy Charles Gray in Diamonds Are Forever. You know, just right idea, Mr. Bond, but wrong pushy.
But then you get Telly.
You get Telly, who's fantastic.
Most menacing one.
That's why I like him. I like hands-on Blofeld.
Yeah. Harem, hands-on Blofeld.
Merry Christmas, 007. Oh, what a shame. He was a sportsman too. Very American Blofeld. He's like a gangster. That's why I love his performance in that film.
Yeah, didn't he wear like a mink coat at one point?
He does have a fur coat on at one point.
Yeah. It's like that's so gangster. That's so New York.
While he's smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, that's so New York. Kojak. Yeah.
Who loves your baby. He could have. I don't think he was ever in a Hitchcock film. So yeah, Anthony Dawson. I like his role in this because he's kind of a scumbag, and like you can totally buy him as this guy that went to Cambridge, and yet he's willing to do all this shady shit.
Yeah, and that's why it's so interesting to have that Hitchcock was writing about or was directing films like this, putting out films like this, because it's that the people that you suspect the least are most capable, right, of just succumbing to these terrible things.
An ex-tennis pro, Tony Wendis.
Yeah, and it's a lesson of like never succumb to your pride.
Weird connection to Strangers on a Train, because Guy Haines in that film is also
another classic.
Another
classic.
Yeah. Look, we can't talk about this film without talking about the mid-Atlantic accents.
Yep. Well, really, it was the inheritance.
Congratulations, Inspector. I love at the end. He knows he's caught and he just pours himself a drink and congratulates Hubbard.
Yep.
So he must have been doing a false accent, because Ray Milland is from Wales.
Right.
Clearly speaking in this mid-Atlantic accent, as is Grace Kelly. And of course, she was American. She was from Philadelphia. But, Tony, because it's not, neither of them are doing full-on English accents.
But it's set in London. So.
Right. It's set in London.
Did you spot Hitchcock in the film?
In the picture?
Yeah.
Yes. I would say it's an awkward-looking composite.
Yeah.
I like the hugely fake cigar in Anthony Dawson's mouth.
So, listeners, if you didn't know, Hitchcock was very well known for making appearances in his own films.
It's fun to spot these things.
Yeah, it's what he was like Stan Lee before Stan Lee in Marvel films.
Pretty much. A lot of good dialogue in this film too. What is that line that Tony says to Mark about like you can't commit murder on credit or something?
Yeah. I'll just say this again. There's something to be said about the simplicity of Hitchcock's shots and framing and like balance, but knowing when to turn it up to build the tension of the scene or to accentuate the scope of how to build tension with the surroundings. I feel like this is just a really great example of like understanding technically how to use like the camera to also tell the story, but letting the actors also do the heavy work. So despite phoning it in, man, impressive.
Do you want to give your rating then?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that was a really good. Oh man. All that said, despite the poorly written female lead, I don't put that on Hitchcock. Yeah, I give this one an A. Like it's just yeah, I give this an A. But it's not like this is where if you look at like the number score, like this is an A, but this is more like 9.293.
You're not putting it in the top tier of Hitchcock.
No, this is 9.293.
Very entertaining film for me. Ray Milland is what really makes this work. I mean, yes, we talked about the blocking and the suspense that Hitchcock creates and the simplicity of it. Those things are great, but I think without Ray Milland's extremely charismatic performance, this film doesn't work nearly as well as it does. I don't want to say it's a carry job from him, but the cast is so small. Everyone else, I think, is fine. Although John Williams as Hubbard is pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
But this entire thing is propelled by Ray Milland as Tony, right? Definitely, this is not in the top tier Hitchcock for me. I agree with, I think, what is the general assessment of this in terms of Hitchcock? Like, oh, well, why isn't this listed in the top tier Hitchcock? Because I don't think it's in the top tier Hitchcock. But even A Phone Job from Hitchcock is better than most. It's really well paced. I keep coming back to that stage thriller thing that this is described as. I think that makes it pretty unique. I don't think it's a masterpiece by any means, but I certainly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. I watched this a couple times to prepare for this episode, and I enjoyed it more on each subsequent viewing. I would definitely watch this again. My wife really enjoyed this. She watched it with me. I'm going to give it a B+. It's a classic, and it's not at the same time for me. Do you know what I mean?
There's just no. I respect your decision. I just feel like for me, there's too many classic moments in it, and it also does live up to my expectations of a great Hitchcock film.
Right, and I completely understand why you would give this with an A. I define a B+ as a great film that's highly rewatchable. That's how I view this. I can't quite put it in that A territory where I would put a lot of his other stuff that we were talking about, you know, like a film that came out the same year as this, Rear Window. That's an A+ for me. That is like, well, I have that like a full letter grade above this. That is so much more iconic for me. And I take your point. This definitely has some moments. I totally see the influence of this.
Yeah, and this is why, like, for me, I want to go back to that conversation we had around what gets knocked out of the top 5 or top 10 films for Hitchcock if you're not going to include this one, right? Or if, like, maybe someone is going to include this one. The dude made so many movies, and
Right.
he has a few that are in contention, right, for some of the greatest films of all time.
Right.
So this is like, what is this film mellow?
Kind of, in a way,
right?
yeah.
It's like you got to give the guy his due.
Yeah. It's a Hall of Fame movie for me, but it's definitely in that second tier of what he did. It's kind of like when you're assessing a lot of like Spielberg's movies, when you're like, this is amazing, but it's not quite on the same level as like his top tier stuff, which is not a fault of this film. But yeah, I stand by my B+.
Yeah, excellent. Well, fun film. Always, there's a lot more to talk about Hitchcock in the future. But there's no real modern contemporary.
David Fincher, maybe?
Maybe.
Panic Room's a very Hitchcocky movie.
That is a very Hitchcocky
Zodiac, sort of. No, that's more horror, I'd say. I don't know. What do I know? I don't know anything.
I think Zodiac is less funny enough. I feel like it's not linear enough to be a
good point.
To be a Hitchcock film.
Yeah, they weren't making that kind of movie in the 50s.
Because that wasn't a Zodiac isn't a character piece, right?
Yeah, this is like very, very much like it's described as stage thriller. Well, that's it for Dial M for Murder. If I had more free time on my hands, I would check out the remakes. Like I keep saying throughout this recording, oh, I really want to see A Perfect Murder. I'm not gonna be watching that.
I mean, where even is it? Tubi?
It seems like a Tubi movie.
Yeah, there's so much good movies on Tubi.
It's got your guy Mike Douglas in it.
And Meg Ryan.
No, Gwyneth
Paltrow.
Yeah, and Viggo.
So that's
Viggo Mortensen is the murderer.
So those are all like that's a young Gwyneth Paltrow. That's a young Viggo Mortensen. All right.
It's Michael Douglas is not horned up and nearly ruins his life in that film.
And that's also like kind of like sun setting on Michael Douglas peak, right?
Yes, that came out in I think 1998.
Yeah, that's kind of he's saying bye to the era.
Yeah, post Ghost in the Darkness, pre Catherine Zeta-Jones though, which he got it. He did work there.
Yeah, high five.
Yeah, high five. Still married. We're rooting for you, Mike. I have nothing else to add about Dial M for Murder.
No,
but that's it for this week's edition of Why Wasn't It Better? Thanks for listening and see you next time.